Live from the Ken and Valerie Baker studio at WHYY, this is Studio 2.
On Wednesday, September 10th, welcome to the show, friends. I'm Cherry Gregg.
Oh, friends. I like you threw in the friends there. I'm Avi Wolfman, Aaron. Hello, friend.
Yes. So the show today, the GOP, once the party of Reagan's free markets, is now embracing government ownership stakes in major corporations under President Donald Trump. Recent examples, if you don't know, include Trump's securing a 10% stake in Intel, a golden share in U.S. Steel, and revenue sharing deals with NVIDIA. Supporters say it's smart industrial policy and a win for taxpayers, and critics call it socialism, crony capitalism, or even extortion. So today we're going to explore this topic with a Republican and a libertarian with different points of view. And we want to hear from you, our listeners, at home, on the road, elsewhere. Do you think the U.S. government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington stay out of business? And of course, give us your why or why not. You can call us. The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please share this video and then put your comments in the chat.
And one of the broader questions this gets at, Cherry, is what does the Republican Party stand for today?
Yeah.
This was such a core part of the party's identity for so many decades. And so we're talking today specifically about economics. But in the shadow of that is this larger question of Trump and then post-Trump. What is the GOP? So again, the big questions we're asking you: do you think the U.S. government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington stay out of business? Why or why not? 888-477-9499. Email studio2@whyy.org.
Trio of news stories, Avi Wolfman, Aaron.
Story number one: Philadelphia prosecutors are downgrading charges in a Center City shooting that's got a lot of attention locally. Prosecutors initially charged a man named John Kelly with murder in the shooting death of Lauren Jardine outside a downtown convenience store. But after reviewing video footage, they changed that to voluntary manslaughter. Police told our news partner 6ABC that Kelly was in an altercation with another woman when Jardine, the eventual victim, intervened. Video appears to show Jardine brandishing a gun and Kelly holding a screwdriver before a struggle ensues. Kelly at some point seems to get control of the gun in that struggle and then shoot the victim, killing her.
Yeah, this story is beyond tragic and it's been all over my timeline on social media, because here you have a woman trying to intervene to help another person, something that many people would never do because they're so afraid that this would be the outcome, right? And this took me back to bystander intervention training that I took as a reporter. And at the time, I very nervously intervened in an incident. And in training, you learn that you can intervene by aiding the victim. You only address the victim. You say, can I help you? Should I call the police? While keeping a distance. And I actually use this method to help a woman I witnessed being harassed by 3 men. And when I tell you my heart was racing, I was so afraid. I thought, am I going to be attacked by these men? What's going to happen? But I did it because the young woman was the same age as some people in my family, and I thought I would want someone to stand up for her. And luckily, these men, once I intervened, they left her alone. I made sure she got home okay. But so many people are afraid to help others because of this incident. And so, I send, prayers and best wishes to the woman's family because this is a scary situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. One of the reasons this story has gotten so much attention is because so many of us can relate to being in a situation like that at some point in our lives.
Second story, Visit Philadelphia says it will find a new home for the slavery exhibits at the president's house in Old City if the Trump administration decides to remove them. If you don't know what Visit Philadelphia is, it's the city's main tourism booster, and it has decided to step up after the president's house was flagged by the Trump administration for content review alongside a dozen exhibits at Independence National Historic Park for depictions of slavery or other facts that, quote, inappropriately disparage Americans past or living. Now, these changes could come to the exhibits as soon as September 17th, which is next week. Angela Val, CEO of Visit Philly, she told the Philadelphia Inquirer that the agency wants to make sure that all aspects of the nation's history is represented here in Philadelphia, and that they will work with Independence Visitor Center to identify partners with privately owned spaces where the exhibits, if they are removed, can be displayed.
Yeah, so the idea of taking these from public property, putting them on private property. I was surprised to see Visit Philly do this. In my experience, they've been neutral, apolitical.
Yeah.
This is not that. So it's interesting to see them inhabit this new role. It also reminded me a little bit, just a little bit, because they're very different situations of the fate of the Rizzo statue, which used to be on public property. It was removed, and now it's apparently going to be, we think, redisplayed on some sort of private property around the city. And I wonder if that's going to happen with monuments, with statues, with exhibits. People will say, okay, the government doesn't want to be involved in whatever this is. We're going to put it in a prominent private location. And then what does that do to this whole debate about who we honor and what stories we tell?
Yeah. And by the way, I want to shout out Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, because they had a town hall where this solution came out as a result of people sort of sounding the alarm and saying they wanted to resist.
Yeah. Visit Philly typically, by the way, will do things like tell you great restaurants to go to.
Oh, good transition. I like that. So good. So good.
So speaking of great restaurants in Philadelphia, the New York Times has an annual list of America's 50 best restaurants right now, and 2 Philadelphia spots made the cut. The list just came out.
Go Philly.
One of them is Mon. You heard of Mon?
This is the first time I've heard of both of these restaurants. Yeah,
Cherry.
I know. I'm asleep at the wheel.
Times.
I'm asleep at the wheel.
Mon is a small, buzzy Cambodian restaurant near the Italian market. Very small, by the way, and it's very hard to get in. The other one on the list was Meeting House, which is a neighborhood pub in Kensington with a small, humble menu but big-time taste. They were the only 2 Pennsylvania spots on the New York Times list. Sorry, Pittsburgh. Sorry, Harrisburg. Sorry, Allentown.
But go Philly.
No South Jersey either. No Delaware. So Mon and Meeting House, according to the New York Times, 2 of the 50 best spots in America. You've been to neither.
I've been to neither, but I have to say I have heard of Meeting House.
Oh, you heard of Meeting House?
Yeah, I hadn't heard of Mon, though.
Because it's in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think that's probably it, and it gets a little buzzy.
So you haven't been to either.
I haven't been to either.
You will go to both of them?
I would. I mean, but, according to the
great.
Inquirer, the Mon reservations for the month go minutes.
Yeah, they get snapped up.
And the lunchtime line is around the corner. But hopefully, if you're in line right now for Mon, you're listening to Studio 2.
So that's a great point, by the way. The Mon thing is crazy because it's a tiny restaurant. Like there's only there's so few seats, and so that has added to the intrigue, the scarcity, right, and the intrigue. But it's also a great restaurant. You're right that the hack for Mon, which I've eaten there, is you go for lunch, and there are no reservations at lunch, so you just line up before they open. And I went on a weekday that I had a day off, and I think we got there like 5 minutes before they opened, and we walked, We walked right in.
But seriously,
that's the hack.
But I have to say, these spots, the areas, the places where they are like good luck spots. Because
they are indeed.
Got to mention that. And you pointed this out in our meeting earlier, that the restaurants, I think Mon is at the Kalea.
So here's the deal. So
explain that, please. That was a good point.
Mon is in the same location where Kalea, which is a celebrated Thai restaurant, used to be. Meeting House is in the same location where a beloved neighborhood bar called Memphis Tap Room used to be.
Yeah.
So the key to creating a great restaurant is to find an already great restaurant.
And then move in.
Tell them to move out. Farm the aura. You know what I mean? Farm that aura real good.
Right. Walk in
and
there.
then repurpose it and create your great restaurant.
And then people looking for the old restaurant could be pleasantly surprised.
That's right.
When you're sitting in there with some good food.
Foolproof business plan. I just need some investors.
I love it.
I'm going to tell a great restaurant to move, and then I'm going to move in myself with whatever. I don't know what I would serve. I guess radio inspired food.
I don't know. Maybe like the Caesar. Would you have
the dirty spicy
Caesar martini on there?
No, that would be too derivative. I'm going to come out with my own salad drink. Okay.
All right.
All right. Speaking of business, Is it good business for the U.S. government to get involved with private companies such as Intel? Well, by the way, we are involved at this point. You and I and all taxpayers have a stake of Intel at this point, and a couple other companies. President Trump seems to like the idea, but not all Republicans do. Give us a call today, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. Do you think the U.S. government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington stay out of business? Why or why not? We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Studio 2. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arendt. Our economic system, based on individual freedom, private initiative, and free trade, has produced more human progress than any other in history. It is in all of our interest to preserve it, protect it, and strengthen it. Those are the words of Ronald Reagan, and for a long time they represented the ideological core of Republican economic policy.
But perhaps not anymore. Donald Trump seems to be a skeptic of free trade, and he's injected the government into private business, literally purchasing large portions of major companies. Is this a necessary reset, or will this lead to a permanent change in our economic system? And what does today's Republican Party stand for economically?
We will debate all of that today with a pair of experts. Tad DeHaven is a senior policy analyst with the Cato Institute, a free market think tank. Tad, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
And with us in studio is Guy Shiraki, columnist for Real Clear PA and Broad and Liberty. Guy, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Good to be back.
Yes, and we'd like to invite you, our listeners on the road, at home, and elsewhere to join in the conversation. Our question of the day is this. Do you think the government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington stay out of business? Why or why not? The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please share this video and leave your comments in the chat.
So a quick review of some of what's happened so far under President Trump. Lots of tariffs. 10% stake in Intel, golden share in U.S. Steel, 15% stake in a company called MP Minerals, and 15% of NVIDIA chip sales to China that the government has demanded. And of all of those things, and perhaps some that I didn't list, Tad DeHaven, which of them raises the biggest red flag to you?
Well, I think it's collectively a red flag. This is largely unprecedented times that we're living through. And the sad part is I don't have a lot of answers right now. Nobody does, and that's a common theme when I get questions about what's going on and where's this going. We don't know, and a big reason why is the White House doesn't know. There's been a lot of talk about the Intel stakes and the NVIDIA, AMD pay for play, and people are affixing isms to it. Is it communism, socialism, state capitalism, Peronism? And while there's certainly aspects of it that meets those isms, in reality, really what it comes down to is Donald Trump sees the federal government as his business, and he does not want to be constrained by Congress, the law, the Constitution, or anything else. He wants the ability to treat the economy like his business and do what he wants to do. And that's much different than having a sort of political or ideological philosophy guiding the White House's actions.
Guy, do you think there's a political philosophy guiding all this, or is this just the whims of Trump, the CEO?
I think the slogan that the president's throwing around and others do, I think, is the guiding principle. It's about make America great again. And in this instance, the common theme from what you've outlined, Avi, is that he's trying to make national security great again. He's trying to make the quality of life. One of the things that's a common thread through all those is microchips, which is now no longer in 2025. It's not a side issue. It's not an end unto itself. This program couldn't happen without microchips. Our hospitals couldn't happen without microchips. Our military, our communications, our quality of life. We've known for years that we have a genuine problem. We don't make enough of them for our quality of life, let alone we're going to need in an AI future. Both parties either ignored it and then they talked through it. 5 years ago, they came up with an idea to spend billions of taxpayer dollars with the much ballyhooed CHIPS Act, which did almost nothing to change the issue. The president has taken 2 steps to make sure that we'll have microchips in the short term. In essence, give us a pause from the crisis. Longer term, the microchip issue is about precious metals and minerals in the United States, in Canada, and yes, in Greenland. Remember Greenland? To make sure that we can make them so that we're not dependent on China or Taiwan. And China could either shut down Taiwan by taking it over or put a blockade. That would endanger our quality of life. In essence, the president is a problem solver. His instincts are often conservative, but he's ultimately a problem solver, and he won't be beholden to an ideology to fix the problem. We needed microchips for today. We need them for tomorrow. This is a short-term way to try and make sure that we have them to ensure our quality of life and protect our national security. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in the short term. Let's check back in 3 or 5 years. But right now, this made smart sense to make our economy stronger and protect our national security.
Yeah, I want to read this comment from David, who says, capitalism is not working as intended in America anymore. In theory, competition keeps prices fair and innovation constant. However, with the flood of monopolies, the system is unfair to consumers. And so my follow-up to you, Guy, is, why Intel? It doesn't seem like Intel was this innovative company doing big things. They were actually kind of stodgy. Isn't there better ways to shore up the national security with microchips than, taking a 10% stake in a company that wasn't necessarily the innovator when we talk about right now?
No, they're a boring company that makes microchips. They're not an innovative cutting edge. They make a product that we need. And the reality is, again, if I don't mean to exaggerate, but I'll exaggerate the point. If the president had bought a 10% stake in a sneaker company or an orange juice company or a paper supply company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, I would be troubled. This is about microchips. It's a necessary part of our life. And the reality is that we have the minerals in Colorado, in California, in Nevada, and frankly, in the coal waste in northern Pennsylvania that we need to get access to. But right now, we have laws and regulations that prevent that. So while he works with Congress to fix that so that Americans can build microchips in Pennsylvania or wherever we need to build them, this was a necessary step. Look, again,
let's let Tad get in there.
Tag in there, because I think you want to interject. Go ahead, Tad.
Guy, part of the issue here is Donald Trump's not working with Congress. He has no interest in working with Congress. But I think when you talk about national security and that this has to be done, you're not telling us exactly what exactly is the benefit to the federal government, and particularly this administration or the administrations to come after it, be it President AOC or President Newsom. Specifically, what does government ownership shares do for Intel and semiconductor manufacturing in the United States, specifically?
Yeah, Guy. So I think that's a fair question, because one of the areas of skepticism here is that this is going to make the problem worse, and in fact, it's going to convince, maybe subtly, maybe indirectly, or perhaps directly, companies to buy Intel products to curry favor with the Trump administration, and
Even if
thus
they're
make
not the
us,
best.
less competitive in other areas.
The reality is that 60% of the world's microchips come from Taiwan. The reality is the United States does not produce enough. This is a short-term solution to a unique problem that touches
What
every
is the
aspect
solution?
of it.
How does it benefit microchip
It
production?
gives us some breathing room, while hopefully what I believe the long-term plan is to build them here, to create the infrastructure. Right now, we don't have the facilities and we don't have access to the minerals and the precious metals you need. My hope is that this is the first part of a long-term plan, and that years from now, we won't be in the business of being involved with companies, because we'll be manufacturing them in brand new companies. But right now, you cannot do it because the United States does not have access to the metals and minerals. The only way we possibly could is to ask China for them, and China gets them by having teenagers mine in Africa, and then they control them. That I don't. Again,
you're still not explaining exactly what the Trump administration can do with the government ownership that's going to do all these things that you said it's going to do. You're still not
make
laying
sure
it
that
out.
we'll get the supply, that they won't go elsewhere, that we will get
By
enough
forcing
to keep,
Apple to use inferior chips that were produced
no,
with
not
government
forcing
approval.
Apple, by making
why not?
sure that the
Because he's
basics we
but
can
he's-
do. Again, you and I agree on a lot of the way the economy and the nation should run. I'm willing to allow this in the short term on this unique issue. We're not talking about some arbitrary point. One of the challenges, or one of the frustrations I have with my friends and neighbors who are progressives, is that there's such adherence to an ideology that they're unwilling to admit when there's a problem with adhering to the ideology, that real problems. We've tried the free market. The economy and the world has changed. We need microchips. This is a short-term solution.
Can I
If
ask-
we're doing it 20 years from now, let me know.
Let me flip this to
What
Tad
is
real
your
quick.
answer to do it? I guess the alternative is,
Right,
what's the
exactly.
answer if you don't do this? Hope China lets us have them? We saw how that worked during COVID. They take care of China and their allies first and America second.
So
I don't want China determining our quality
Let
of
me
life or
flip this to
national
Tad
security.
real quick. So I guess the reverse of that, Tad, is if you agree, and I don't know if you do agree, that there is an emergency around access to microchips, what would be the free market solution to that? And I'll read a quote here. This is maybe ironically from the New Republic, Todd Tucker. State enterprises account for over 20% of the largest companies in the world and include iconic companies such as Mercedes-Benz, Sweden's green steelmakers. Sovereign wealth funds of Norway, Alaska, and other jurisdictions now control more assets than hedge funds and private equity firms combined, and include the planet's top holders of private stock. He goes on to say, in a world where it's logistically feasible for a handful of C-suites to locate goods productions in one of a few low-wage countries, countries could be cut off from the supply flows that fuel their businesses, tax bases, and militaries, essentially making the point that you expose yourself to too much risk if you just trust the free market in essential industries that are vital to national security and economic prosperity. So what would be the free market solution you see?
Yeah, I
Tad?
mean, look, there's no doubt that there's geopolitical risk associated with the concentration of fabrication in Taiwan and in East Asia. But, COVID was a wake-up call, I think, to the private sector, and that we had these jams and supplies, and that really brought home the issue of being able to move parts around and obtain goods. And when the CHIPS Act was being discussed, Taiwan Manufacturing Semiconductor, they already had plans to build facilities in Arizona, and other companies were already considering doing the same. Largely Intel's behest, because they're a struggling company. They were the big cheerleaders behind the CHIPS Acts that gives out grants and loans to encourage domestic production here in the United States. Intel's interesting, though, and why it receives the importance it does is because it's both a chip designer and a fabricator. That means it designs the chips and it makes the chips. And so there's been a lot of questions in recent years as the company has floundered because of its own poor decision making, which which is what happens with free market capitalism. You pay the price for bad mistakes. But there's been a discussion of whether they should split up the foundry from the design section and perhaps sell off the design, which is much more lucrative, and use it to finance a build out or bring in other investors. SoftBank just gave them $2 billion. But all of those decision making and all of those factors to consider, all of that gets thrown out the door when one human being has the ability now to tell Intel what they can and cannot do. And in fact, as part of this deal, there's effectively a poison pill that makes it much more difficult for Intel to break up the foundry from the design, if indeed that may be the better way to go.
But what would be the free market solution to ensure access to any material, raw materials, manufactured materials that are necessary?
We already do this with we do this with defense. I mean, we have defense contractors. We enter into contracts and agreements. You mentioned MP Materials. That could have been another contract to procure these minerals. Instead, they took an ownership stake.
So it's the difference between contracts and stakes. I think that's what we're driving toward here, that you're okay with the contracts to shore up or to mitigate some of the risk. You're not okay with the government having direct ownership of some part of a company.
Because I'm still waiting for somebody to explain exactly what benefit there is to the federal government, specifically the executive branch, one man and a few other people telling these businesses how they should or shouldn't run their business.
Let's bring in a caller.
Yeah.
What do we got
We
here?
have Robert from West Philly is on the line. Robert, you are on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
My comment is that I don't think that government should be taking stakes in private businesses unless they're going to go full socialism, in which case the American people, who are the ones who are financing any of these purchases, are benefiting from these American businesses. And it seems sort of antithetical to the panic around socialism to then go nationalizing private businesses when there's a personal, one individual's demand for it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Robert from West Philly. And I wonder, Tad, I want to pose this question to you. You have a lot of concerns about this taking of stakes. You just brought that up. Can you articulate what are those big concerns that you have? What are some of the negatives that you see from making this type of move?
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of state-owned enterprises or companies with heavy investment from the state, economics gets switched out for politics, and that leads to corruption. It leads to cronyism, and it also, with regard to industrial policy in general, when governments have stepped in to, quote unquote, rescue those that are too big to fail, you set a precedent. And you disincentivize the company to make rational economic decisions based on the long-term best concerns of the shareholders. Now, instead, you have to do things like please the occupant of the White House. We're actually seeing this now with U.S. Steel, in which the president shook down the company as part of the acquisition by Nippon Steel for a golden share stake in the company, which outlays all kinds of stipulations on what U.S. Steel can hire, where they can move their headquarters, they can't, and a list of all these other things. And it was just announced that a U.S. Steel factory in Illinois is going to be not idled, not closed, because they can't do that without Donald Trump's permission, but they're going to pay the workers fully just to keep it, quote unquote, ready. And so that just goes to show you the politicization, the waste. Obviously, it makes more economic sense for the company to idle the factory, but instead, because now the U.S. Steel has to answer to Donald Trump, they can't do the economically efficient, appropriate thing, which is not good for long-term growth, and it's not good for the economy.
And Guy, I want to get your response to that, because I even think, because government interference does put a thumb on the scale. And I even think about this deal with Intel. On one hand, you had President Donald Trump calling for the resignation of the head of Intel. He goes into this meeting with that CEO, and then all of a sudden comes out with a 10% stake. Does it give the executive so much power over corporate decisions like hiring, firing, who should be in charge, to where it then sort of messes up the market? Guy.
Yeah, and again, I think the balance is between the caller and Tad, which is this is a unique circumstance. I don't think we need to become socialist. I don't think we need to have a nationalized economy. I do think there are those moments. Look, in times of war, the president and the executive branch have weighed in with factories and said we don't need toasters, we need
we're not
weapons.
at war.
We are at economic war. The Chinese have an ability to cripple this economy. They have an ability to take over Taiwan. We saw during COVID, they prioritized themselves. This is a long-term problem. We tried it the legislative way, and it cost us hundreds of billions of dollars, and no more microchips are being built here. We have minerals.
It's not true.
We have minerals that we need to access. Much with the tariffs. The tariffs were good unto themselves, and a mixed bag, but it caused a national debate. This intel is causing a national debate. Why don't we have microchips? Because we don't have factories. Why don't we have factories? Because it's cheaper to do it overseas. And why else? Because we don't have access to the minerals and precious metals. Now we're having a debate. Why aren't we going to Colorado? Why aren't we going to upstate Pennsylvania? Why aren't we going to California and Alaska and getting them? This is about changing it. And in the interim, we can't wait on China to make sure that we can have the quality of life while we figure it out. This is a unique one-off for something that touches every part of our quality of life and our national security. I'm willing to give the president some latitude on this. It is not what you would have done 10 years ago, but it's not 10 years ago. It's 2025.
Well, let me ask you, Guy, because you brought up the war economy, and certainly during World War II, our economy was totally transformed and government interfered in all sorts of ways. But I do think it speaks to this larger question people have about Trump, whether it's economic intervention, whether it's intervention in cities with crime and the National Guard, that his pretense for emergency just seems too thin, and it feels like a slippery slope to intervene in everything. Does that not worry you?
Well, because I don't see him intervening randomly and wantonly as if he wakes up in the morning and does it. The chips issue in particular has been something that, after years of ignoring, both parties recognized 5 years ago, and the plan they took at it didn't work. So he didn't wake up on a whim. And as far as the issue around Washington, D.C., it's been a growing problem. And today we see that the Democratic mayor of Washington, D.C. said it's working. It's improving the quality of life. I don't think he's doing things willy-nilly. I think sometimes there's the narrative that he just throws things at a dartboard and says, I'll mess around with this today. I think it's all goes back to the theme. He's trying to improve the quality of life, the safety and long-term future in a way that both parties ignored, either because they didn't view it as a priority or they were placing ideology above results. We had a microchip problem. He's beginning to fix it. We had a crime problem in Washington, D.C.
But you're not explaining how he's fixing it with a 9.9% stake by the federal government in Intel. You're not explaining it. What specifically
the United States
the Trump
consumer
administration
will
is
have
going to
access, guaranteed access to microchips, and we won't be beholden to China the way we were a month ago.
We're not beholden to China. And if your concerns about supply chains and everything else, look, when it comes to semiconductors and most other goods, it's all global. So we should be working with our partners, whether it's Netherlands, South Korea, what have you, to lower trade barriers and engage in commerce and make sure that we have the free flow of these goods and services. But instead, Donald Trump's doing the complete and other opposite of that. And let's bring up 15 years ago. You know, I love all these Republicans and so-called devotees of the free market now. They're just happening to change their mind about government ownership stakes in a company when they were all pretty wound up about the Great Recession when President Obama took ownership stakes in Citigroup, GM, Chrysler. And you know what? I oppose that, and I still oppose that. But the bottom line was you could make a good case that we were in a deep recession with problems to come if things didn't get shored up. And also the intervention was designed to be short-term in nature, and it was short-term in nature. What's the end game here? What again, there's no details, no specifics other than a guy has to tuck his tail, the CEO of Intel, go to the White House, and out of that comes Donald Trump gets a 10% stake in Intel. And yet I still am waiting to hear somebody who agrees with this or supports it or makes excuses for it explain exactly what Donald Trump and Howard Lutnick, Kevin Hassett are going to do specifically to help Intel accomplish all these great things that you say he's going to accomplish.
We do have to go to a break real quickly. Do you want to respond to that, Guy? We're probably going to go in circles on this one, but real quick before we get to break.
Sure. Look, I'm glad Tad's raising the red flags, right? We should have people out there saying, what are the limits? What are the goals? So I understand that, but that shouldn't stop us from doing what's necessary. What was solved by this is Donald Trump doesn't own anything. The United States taxpayer, the United States citizens have an interest, and we know that we will have access to microchips that we need for a quality of life, while ultimately, I hope in the long term, there are more free market economy, free market companies making them with American workers, protecting our quality of life from medicine to national security. That's the long-term play that I see.
Let's read a comment in from Brian who says, in a capitalist economy, the government should stay on the sidelines and make sure companies follow the laws and regulations. The government should not be investing in commercial businesses. This could be interpreted as an endorsement and skew the market value of the company and could potentially turn it into a meme stock. So that is Brian's take. We'll have more of your takes on the other side of this break. You're listening to Studio 2 on WHYY. Our email is studio2@whyy.org. Our number is 888-477-9499. And we're asking you this hour, do you think the government should own stakes in companies like Intel or stay out of business? Why or why not? Let us know. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Studio 2. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent. We're talking about free market capitalism and if President Trump's policies are moving away from an idea that was once a centerpiece of conservatism. The president recently had the government take a 10% stake in chip manufacturer Intel, and this, along with government interference in private industry, has unnerved some Republicans. Our question to you is this: do you think the U.S. government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington stay out of business? Why or why not? 888-477-9499. Email studio2@whyy.org. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, drop a comment in the chat.
And let me reintroduce our guests. We have Tad DeHaven, policy analyst at the Cato Institute, a free market think tank. We also have Guy Shiraki, a columnist for Real Clear PA and Broad and Liberty. I'm going to read a couple comments. Dave says, I don't have a problem with the government investing in private business as a concept. However, to make it work, we would have to create a new class of shares of stock. Les says the Trump administration is misusing the power of the federal government to pick economic winners and losers, both in the U.S. and abroad. This facilitates authoritarianism and fosters corruption. It's more like Putin's control of Russian oligarchs than it is like socialist policies in Western Europe. I wanted to talk about innovation a little bit because that was the big argument for free markets. And so, Guy, I know, you before Trump, you were very supportive of free markets. And I want to talk about how you think having a stake in Intel could affect innovation in the microchip market, for example.
Yeah, so I don't think it'll have a problem because I still think that somebody's going to try and build a better mousetrap. And one of the other issues is looking at access to the materials. And what do we know about creating semiconductors, microchips in the United States with the resources that we have? So am I concerned to the point that I would say no? Am I concerned? Yes. So I said I wasn't just throwing faint praise. I mean, I think folks like Tad should say, be careful. What are the guide rails? I think that's important. I support a free market. I'm a passionate defender of capitalism. I'm a passionate have passionate concerns about socialism. I think this is a unique situation. I don't think it stifles innovation. In fact, if anything, it calls attention to the fact that we as a nation are not prepared for the economy of the 21st century. I sat a month ago at a national conference in Pittsburgh that Senator McCormick put together saying, how could Pittsburgh be ground zero for the AI economy of the 21st century? Well, if we don't have Pennsylvania energy and if we don't have access to semiconductors and microchips, it's a moot conversation.
But what could stop President Donald Trump from saying, there's a national security emergency when it comes to AI? I mean, AI is growing faster than ever. Mm-hmm. He could always say there's a problem. I'm going to take a stake in in open AI, for example. And, we have to do this to protect America, to protect our defenses, to protect our government. What would stop him from doing that?
I think it would stop him would be the courts and Congress and public outcry. And that's why I think we should have the debate we're having today. What's the rationale? What's the goal? What's the objective? I don't like tariffs. I understand the necessity in the short term to reset the manufacturing in this country, to make sure that our allies aren't taking advantage of us. I don't like the government taking ownership, but this was something that we failed to do through both parties. Part of Trump is about fixing problems. He often does them from a right of center way. Sometimes he doesn't. I give him some latitude. I think we need the questions you're raising, the questions Tad's raising are good, but I don't think it should get in the way of fixing the problem. People, Washington, D.C. was a problem. Staffers were afraid to work. There were citizens who were afraid to go about their business. We're fixing the problem. It's right to say, how long will the troops stay there? It's right to say, will they go to other cities? But in the meantime, the mayor of Washington, D.C. says, thank God they're here because lives are better, crime and murder are down. This is a short-term issue.
Well,
this is a short-term issue.
Let me ask you a question.
Fear.
Can I stir a question to you, Tad? Because I know you want to respond. You brought up tariffs, Guy. I'm sorry we have so many callers and comments. I'm going to get to some of you, I promise. Mm-hmm. But I think what we're missing in this conversation about Intel and in the buying particular stakes of companies is that it is in concert with tariffs. That is in concert with Trump's apparent interest in interfering with the Federal Reserve in some way. Mm-hmm. All of these speak to somewhere a latent ideology, maybe not an ideology, but something in his core, and maybe now in the core of the Republican Party, that says the federal government should take more of a role in fiscal policy, in the economy. I'm curious, Tad, do you see that at all, or do you think that that is an overstatement of what Trump believes? And as you said, kind of in the beginning, Trump really doesn't maybe believe anything.
No, he doesn't believe. Outside of quote-unquote trade is bad, he really doesn't have any established beliefs or long-term agenda other than just say we're going to make things great again. But when you look at the specifics, it's either not going to make things great again or you can't explain how it's going to make things great again. But let's talk about fear, because I heard about fear. Right now there's a culture of fear in this company where business owners are afraid to speak up, afraid to criticize. Because look what happened to the head of Intel after he got caught in a crossfire, just because the president happened to see something on Fox Business News that the chairman of Intel had previous ties to the Chinese. So Donald Trump called up Coca-Cola and demanded they put corn syrup in their Coke. There's a ton of fear out there. There's a ton of uncertainty, and uncertainty and fear causes paralysis. And now the good news is the United States is a resilient company, despite this 10 years of trashing America and talking about how horrible it is and what's happened to it, and that if the Supreme Court rules against his quote unquote emergency tariffs, that it'll be the end of the country. None of that's true. It's unfortunate that we're walking away from that which made this country an economic powerhouse and turning towards, frankly, the policies of Xi in China or the Perón dynasty down in Argentina.
Yeah. By the way, our question of the day is, do you think the U.S. government should own stakes in companies like Intel, or should Washington just stay out of politics? Why or why not? Our number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. I'm going to try to get two callers in back to back right now. We have Mike from Trenton on the line. Mike, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Oh, hey, thanks for taking my call. Good discussion. I think you're the individual who's sort of advocating support for the president's Intel stake makes some compelling cases. I'd like to think that we might be able to think that this is a one-off or unique situation. I'm not sure anything that Donald Trump does is a one-off, and I don't believe there is a philosophy or an idea behind it. I think it's whimsical. I think to suggest that Congress might push back against that would be to be ignoring everything that Congress has done since the president's taken office. My specific question, though, is would you then agree, if you agree that the Intel circumstance is such that we need to do this as an interim step before we can manufacture more of our own chips, the candidate for mayor of New York, Mondami, is suggesting he wants to have the city invest in grocery stores in neighborhoods that are food deserts. Would you then agree then that in fact is similarly meeting a unique need that's not otherwise being met, and that is something of an emergency situation? So would you embrace Mondami's view?
Yeah,
thanks,
you,
Mike from Trenton. I guess maybe we should have Guy respond directly to that because it was geared to you, Guy.
He led with the good and then got me. So I'm going to make Tad happy. I think there's a difference. I think the Mondami suggestion of the government running grocery stores in New York is not an issue. The reason that there aren't grocery stores in certain neighborhoods in New York is because of crime and theft and because of the quality of life issues. And the way to solve that is by reducing crime. Whether the government of New York City owns the grocery store or not, if people are afraid to shop at night or there's a high incidence of shoplifting, fix the problem. So again, to me, that wouldn't raise to the issue of something that impacts the national economy the way that microchips, which are now essential to every single part of our life, from healthcare to military to communication.
By the way, another person wants to talk to you. Tom from Bluebell is on the line. Tom, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment for Guy here?
Hi, I wanted to ask Guy, first of all, your first caller right before me already showed that what Guy thinks is a one-off, there's going to be 100 other people that think they've got the next reason for a one-off. So you set this precedent. You're now ready for every president and every Congress's idea of when this needs to be done. But I'd also like to ask him if he sees the future so well and knows that this is going to be a problem in the future with China controlling the microchip thing. Why aren't the companies in the United States, why aren't those microchip companies seeing the same thing, and why don't they invest now and invest their money and their shareholders' money, and maybe even Guy would have friends who could invest in it and be ready for it when this happens? Why isn't the free market preparing for this? Why is Guy and Donald Trump the only one that can see this coming?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom from
Thanks
Bluebell.
Tom from Bluebell. You want to respond, Guy? Because that, again, was directed to you.
So Tom, what I would tell you is that for a long time it was ignored, and there was a bipartisan effort to try and fix it with the CHIPS Act, and it largely failed. It spent a bunch of money for very little ROI, and so the problem 5 years later is worse. And to the question of why aren't you and I, or why aren't a group of investors or entrepreneurs, why isn't Mark Zuckerberg building a factory in Pittsburgh? Because you can't get access to the materials, because the materials we need are off limits because we have EPA regulations and Department of Interior regulations that put them off limits. So I think if we said that we were going to let folks get to the things in the coal residue in Pennsylvania, in Alaska, in Colorado, in California, I think you would see people understand that there's then an opportunity they would build them, because the largest market is in North America and this hemisphere, and they would do it. But right now you can't build it. If you're missing materials, if you're missing minerals, there's no sense building the factory because you can't assemble the product.
Yeah, let me. I'm going to bring in one more caller before we wrap up, but maybe to tee this up, I think what the caller might talk about. There has been this case that some have made for a type of state government capitalism fusion, and people will point to like China. where clearly the government is involved, but there is a free market component, and where the government intervenes seems to be at least hedged toward national security interests, building infrastructure, etc. We have Mike from Germantown on the line, who I think wants to talk about some of that stuff. So maybe I'm off here, maybe I'm on here. Mike from Germantown, you're on the show. What do you got for us?
Thank you very much, and you're right on the money. I don't know what the big problem is here. What I see with this is nothing more than a small business administration loan for a high-risk sort of venture that the commercial banks can't handle. And I think the really key question, so there's nothing extraordinary about it, it's just this SBA loan on steroids. The real question is, and I'm old enough to have seen industry and light manufacturing move from Philadelphia down south, then to Mexico, and then overseas. The real question, I think, is what made industry, light manufacturing, do those moves? And this just may be the opening shot to begin to identify the real problem of why we went from a post-World War II the people who invented all that crap, and now the corporate world sees us not being the appropriate place to have it here. This could be the opening shot to put this in back in context. And by
Thanks,
the way,
Mike. We are real quick because we're toward the end of the show here, Mike.
The steel industry. The government got involved with the steel industry, made them post World War II go to the old open hearth furnace process instead of oxygen reduction, which basically made this really all that money went into old obsolete sort of technology. Yeah. That was a decision that came from the U.S. government. Yeah. So don't tell me they don't interfere.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for your listening.
Thanks, Mike. So real quick, Tad, I want you to respond to what Mike's saying, sort of laying out the case for this reset. And I also brought up the idea of China and the way that they compete here with this muscular combination of government and free market.
Well, then I'll address real quickly the issue of manufacturing. The United States is a manufacturing powerhouse. It has and is and it will continue to be. The tariffs on steel and such and inputs aren't helping. But if you look at the decline in manufacturing, every other industrialized country has gone through this as it shifted from agrarian to steel and manufactured goods into the service economy. In fact, it's starting to happen in China now. As China's wealth grows, it's moving away a bit from manufacturing, and the share of services is rising. That's because they're outsourcing more. The cost is going up, and so Vietnam and other low-cost countries are taking it up. But if you look, they talk about the hollowed-out Midwest and all these other things. Look, the jobs, they went to the South. They went to the right-to-work state where it was easier to start a business, start a factory, open a factory, hire labor, keep your cost in line. So in terms of the labor force in manufacturing, sure, we don't need as many people to produce because we're a powerhouse. We have the technology. We substitute capital for labor, and so our productivity is through the roof. But really, it was a transition from the Midwest to the South and the East. The idea that we just all of our manufacturing went overseas, it's a canard. It's nonsense. And frankly, after 10 years of watching somebody campaign and getting people to buy into this, it's sad.
Well, we do have to wrap up the conversation, but it was a good one, and I really enjoyed the perspective shared by you too, but also our callers. Tad DeHaven is a senior policy analyst with the Cato Institute, a libertarian-leaning think tank. Tad, thanks so much for your time today on Studio 2. And Guy Shiraki, columnist for Real Clear PA and Broad and Liberty. Guy, it's always a pleasure to have you here. You're welcome back, and thanks for your insights.
Yeah, and I want to shout out Gary who called in. We couldn't get to Gary, one of our callers. And thanks to everybody who wrote in and all the comments online. Also, thanks to the folks who helped put the show together, our producers Debbie Builder and Andreas Copes. Thanks to Mike Schiffler, our visual producer, Al Banks and Tina Calicay, engineered today's show. Our executive producer is Kevin McCory. From Studio 2 here at WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman Aaron, and I'll keep manufacturing these radio episodes, folks. We will talk to you tomorrow.
Crank them out.
We'll be back tomorrow at noon with another hour of Studio 2, flirting with a couple of ideas for tomorrow.
We are.
Keeping it open. The intrigue. Feel the intrigue, okay? Hope you join us. And remember, you can always listen to past shows wherever you get your podcast. Leave a review. We would love it.
Yes, and be sure to watch us on YouTube or Facebook and then share the video. You can also hit that subscribe button to get the alerts whenever we go live. Coming up next on WHYY, it's Here and Now. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow.